Hi, my name is Kristen. This is Kristen Craves Books. So I have 7 books to talk about in this video. I've discovered that 7 books seems to be my sweet spot with these recent reads videos. Once I get to that many, I think, okay, I need to sit down and film. And I have 4 that I read physically, 3 that I listened to, and I have some strong opinions, mixed opinions. I don't think any new favorites, but some that I really enjoyed and then some that I really did not. And I had a bit of an epiphany, so I will talk about that when I get to that book. But the first one is one that is technically a sequel, and I was going to save it for my summer sequel wrap-up, but it's really a companion, so you can read this on your own, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention because I think summer's a good time to read this, and that is Sense and Second Degree Murder by Tirzah Price. The first book in this series is Pride and Premeditation, so if you're sensing a theme, these are Jane Austen retellings, and they're also murder mysteries. They're very much cozy mysteries, so I just love that kind of book in the summertime. I thought the first one was really fun. I really loved being back with these characters that I love, but in a different setting. But I actually think I preferred Sense and Second Degree Murder, and part of me wonders if that is because I am not as aware of the original text. I've read Sense and Sensibility, I've seen the movie, but I'm not as passionate about it as I am with Pride and Prejudice, so I wonder if that's part of it. But I think the thing is, I love the sister relationships that Jane Austen writes. I love the relationship between Elizabeth and Jane in Pride and Prejudice, and I just don't think we got enough of Jane at all in the first book. So in this one, the sisterhood is so strong, and I think it is stronger in Sense and Sensibility to begin with, so it would be silly not to have that as a theme in this book. But the relationship between Eleanor and Marianne is so complicated, and I think that Tirzah Price did a great job of capturing that, but then adding some lightness. And if you are aware of Sense and Sensibility, you know that it does begin with a death, and that happens in this one, but in this book there's more mystery behind it. Maybe this person was murdered and the sisters are going to look into it. So I loved it. I had such a fun time. They are become very passionate, and they're very much into STEM and experiments, but it felt very authentic to even the time period. And the relationships and romances were great in here, and it really did feel like the original characters, just in a new story, but still felt very familiar. The tone was right. You'll fly through this, so I highly recommend trying these, especially if you're looking to get into cozy mysteries. I think these are a good place to start. And the third book is Manslaughter Park. So obviously a Mansfield Park retelling, and we get that next year, and I'm hoping that we get more. I would like a Northanger Abbey one, so we will see about that. An Emma one, it would just be so much fun. Imagine an Emma murder mystery and what she would get into. That would be so epic. So I hope that Tirzah Price continues doing this series until she gets through all of Jane Austen's novels. So that was a strong one. That was the first one that I read since the last update. And then I read last night The Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo, and this has received a ton of awards, and I think it deserves it. This is a YA historical fiction, which I have not read that genre often. I think the only other YA historical fiction that I've read is Salt to the Sea. That is the one that comes to mind instantly, but I really like this one. It is set in the 1950s in San Diego, in Chinatown, and we are following a young woman named Lily, who she's a teenager, and it really starts with her discovering for herself that she's attracted to girls, and that slowly unravels. And I think if that was your experience, you will relate a lot to Lily. I think a lot of young girls will relate to Lily, and just the things that happen that make you maybe question your attraction. And then of course she's growing up in the 1950s in Chinatown, and she's facing a lot. So to be a lesbian at that time was a very scary thing, and just not done, and very secretive. And she ends up having her first love in Kath, a fellow student at her school, and they secretly go to the Telegraph Club and meet other lesbians and other women in relationships with other women, and really it's a journey of self-discovery, but there's a lot going on around them as well. Her father is facing deportation, and there's a lot of history in America of how Chinese people were treated at that time that I was not aware of, and that Malinda Lo really gets into. So I don't say this often, but you have to read the author's note for this one. I'm going to show you. So here's the author's note at the end here, and she has information about the 1950s and San Francisco at the time, Chinatown and Chinese Americans at that time, and she has photos as well, so she really does her research, lesbians, gender, and the community at that time as well. So she's really done her research and provided a lot of context, and she's got a bibliography in here as well. So I appreciated all of that quite a bit. I really did like her writing, but it's a different kind of writing that I don't think will connect with everybody. This is not one that you fly through. You really have to sit with it, and every word feels intentional, and I just really liked it. There's a beauty pageant involved as well. Lily has a complicated relationship with one of her friends, so there's like a friendship fallout and just a lot going on with her mother and her family. And then we get flashbacks to when her parents first met and got together, and flashbacks to her aunt. So, and again, this is about women and girls who are passionate about STEM. She wants to be an astronaut, or does Kath want to be an astronaut? I can't remember. That's one thing that I will say is I wish we got to know Kath more as a character. She just felt like a way for Lily to discover herself, but we never really got to know her deep down, and I wish that we did, because I think I would have really loved her as a character. But Malinda Lo is releasing another book. I think it's called Scatter of Light, and the cover is gorgeous, and I think that comes out later this year, so I'm excited about that. So I do highly recommend this if you have been eyeing it. And then the next two books are ARCs, and I have mixed feelings about both of them. Well, the first one I don't really have mixed feelings about. I know I didn't like it, so we'll just get into it. And I read this for a buddy read, and this came from the publisher Unsolicited, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get to it, but I thought, why not? There was a buddy read, I'll join, and that is Insomnia by Sarah Pinborough, and I've never read anything by this author. I was curious about Behind Her Eyes, but then the big twist was spoiled for me, so I just never got to it. And this made me realize that I'm done with domestic thrillers. I just can't do them. I think my most disappointing, my most hated books every year end up being domestic thrillers, and I never love them. I never give them more than 3 stars, very rarely, unless it's Lisa Jewell, to be honest with you. So I think I just need to give up. I think I'm just not a thriller person. I don't like Riley Sager. I've discovered that I like a mystery. Give me a murder mystery like Pride and Premeditation, or Sense and Second-Degree Murder, or any cozy mysteries, or just mysteries in general. I like the Louise Penny series, that kind of thing. I am really getting into horror. I like Grady Hendrix and some other horror stuff that I have and I want to get into, but just straight up thrillers, they're not for me, and I have to give them up. I love the idea of reading thrillers in the summertime. All my friends that read in real life love thrillers, but it's just, I can't do it. So I just have to give up on it and know myself. So this one, I liked the premise of this because the idea of insomnia, I understand. I think a lot of people go through insomnia, and you know how that can drive you wild and what that can do to your mental health and your physical health, and that really gets involved in here. But the sister relationship in here wasn't working for me. I have another thing I'm realizing recently is I like sisterhood relationships that are healthy. Yes, they might have some struggles, but they're healthy relationships, like in Sense and Second-Degree Murder. But when it's all toxic, I think I'm over that trope. And then I'm over the trope of a unreliable female character who maybe drinks too much or has to take sleeping pills, and you can't trust her actions. I'm over that. The ending of this, maybe Sarah Pinborough is known for these wild endings, because I know how Behind Her Eyes ends, but it was absolutely ridiculous. And then the obsession with turning 40 was too much for me as well. I understood that she was worried about turning 40 because that was when something happened to her mom, and she thought that she was spiraling into that herself. But it was just over and over again, the turning 40 thing. I just didn't like that. So there's nothing about this that I liked. I gave it a 2-star, but maybe I should lower it to a 1 because I really didn't like it. I mean, I flew through it. It's a quick read. It's a thriller, so you hope that would be the case, but I just thought the ending was absolutely ridiculous. I hated her husband. Not a single character that I liked or could root for or even cared about what happened to them, and that includes the main character. So I didn't love this. I know a lot of people do, but I do think that this is a me thing and a self-discovery thing, that I am done with these kind of thrillers and I should just stop trying. And then the next proof I got, this comes out in August 23rd. And I will say up front, I do recommend this, but for the right audience. This is The Witches of Moonshine Manor by Bianca Maris. And I've read one book by Bianca Maris, and that was Hum If You Know the Words. And if you read that, you will know how good that book is. I absolutely loved it. But that is historical fiction, and it is deeply emotional. There's no humor whatsoever. That is a heavy book. So that's sort of what I expected from this one. I know it's witches and fantasy and different, but I wasn't expecting this to be as satirical as it was, as contemporary as it is. One of the characters in here is a TikToker, and that threw me for some reason. And then just how funny it was, but humor rarely works for me in books. Unless you're T. Kingfisher, it doesn't work, and I don't know what that is about for me, but some of the jokes didn't land. But the whole setup of this was fun, and I flew through it. I read this in one afternoon, and I did obviously get invested because there's a scene at the end that was emotional in like a sweet way, and it brought a tear to my eye. So then that's when I realized, okay, I think I liked this more than I thought. And it is very much Golden Girls meets Practical Magic, and those are two things that I love. So we are following characters who range in age but are all elderly. A couple of them are in their 80s, I believe, and they're all witches, and they all have different powers and how they can harness their powers and stuff, and they live in this manor. And they haven't been paying their bills, and the city is coming for them and is gonna demolish their house and build like an amusement park called Men's World. So you can see where like this satirical, exaggerated, over the top stuff comes in. So they're doing everything they can to save their manor, and then the mayor's daughter gets involved. She's like a teenager, she's a TikToker, and she wants to spread spread the word and help these women, and she really feels connected to them, and that part's sweet. And I liked reading about the relationships between these women, and they have a history. There was a heist in their past that we get flashbacks to, and one of the women is returning after 30 years, and you don't know why until later on in the book. And there's some interesting reveals that happen throughout. So I did like those little reveals, and it was compelling enough. There were high enough stakes to keep me reading. But one of the characters, Jezebel, she is very sex driven, and I felt in some ways that she felt like a caricature, and that was there was no substance to her other than that. And I thought that she could have been a really interesting character if we had gotten to know her better. So that was a little disappointing, but I thought the other witches we did get to know. And Queenie in particular I really liked, and then Ursula I liked as well. And there are some LGBT characters in here, I will say, and there's some interesting conversations about gender that I'd be curious to see what other readers think about. So I'll be curious, I'll be watching for reviews when that comes. But one of the witches is able to change her gender, her appearance, and at first she is comfortable all genders, so she does use her pronouns, but she can appear to be a man, appear to be different genders, different looks, different ages and everything. And she kind of fights with that a little bit in here as well. So I think that was an interesting conversation to have in this context, but I'll be curious to see what other people think. But yeah, overall, I think it took me a minute to get used to it. I had to change my expectations for it, having read this author in the past. And yeah, the humor didn't always work. So I don't know, I'll be curious to see what other people think of this, but look out for it August 23rd. Because also, I want to say, if you read The Change by Kirsten Miller earlier this year, where it's following 3 women who are going through menopause and realize that they have certain gifts, this reminds me of that, but lighter. There's no murder mystery, it's not as deep and heavy, but similar themes, feminism and all that stuff. I think they're tackling the same kind of conversations, just in different ways. So if you liked that, you might like this, or if you thought that was a bit too heavy, you might want to check this one out. So yes, this is The Witches of Moonshine Manor. And then I have 3 e-arcs that I listened to, and this first one I feel like I've talked about a lot already, and that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. And this is exactly my kind of horror. If you are into more subtle horror, if you like that eerie feeling, that tension, that creepiness that you can get from reading horror as opposed to anything too slasher or over the top or gory, which I can appreciate too, but if you're like in the more subtle kind of horror, I think you're gonna love this. If you were a fan of Mexican Gothic by Silvia Marina Garcia, I think you're gonna love this, but I actually prefer this one because I think it's more concise, it's shorter, and I did not like the ending of Mexican Gothic. As much as I liked the book, I thought the ending was too much. This ending's perfect, but they have similar themes, similar vibes. It'll give you the similar feeling. But What Moves the Dead is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Poe, which is a story I'm not familiar with, but now I want to read because I think somebody told me it's only about 36 pages, and if it inspired this book, it's something I'm interested in. So we're following a main character, and they are non-binary, and actually the pronoun conversations in this book are very interesting and I think really well handled. So our main character is friends with these siblings, and they hear that the sister is not doing well. She's very sick, and so they decide to go to this house to visit her and see if they can help in any way. And when they get there, they know that something sinister is happening. The sister is not doing well at all, and there might be more going on than they initially expected. So then we also get the brother, and then there's another character that is present as well, and then some of the staff and stuff. So there's just a vibe. I will never look at hares the same way again, like bunnies and rabbits. That was a lot. So I don't know, there's just a lot of creepiness here, a lot of great conversations, a lot of tension and atmospheric vibes, and really you read this one for the vibes and for T. Kingfisher's writing and just the way that she's able to create memorable characters in so few words. I don't think anybody does that better than she does. So as I said, there'll be a T. Kingfisher readathon coming up. I am posting my TBR of that. It's either up or it'll be the next video, but I think it might be up before this video, so I will link that down below if you're interested in that. But I'm so excited. All I want to do right now is read T. Kingfisher. But moving on, the next audiobook that I listened to was Honey and Spice by Balu Balabaloba, and this was really good. I had an e-arc of this, and I tried to read it, but I couldn't get into the writing style at first, and it took me a minute, but then I got an ALC from Libro.fm, I believe, and I was hooked like this. So the narration is fantastic. Whoever that narrator is, I want to listen to everything she narrates because she is amazing. So I think actually she narrated, what's that book called? My Sister the Serial Killer, and I really liked that audiobook as well. Actually, that's one of my favorite audiobooks. So a narrator to look out for. And this is a romance, and it is set in a university and in Britain. And the college is very much white, but there is a group of Afro-Caribbean students who have created an organization, and we're following Kiki, who is like a radio host, and she talks about different issues, and what she really does is she gives advice to women about dating and then the men at the university. So she has like an interaction with this guy named Malachi, and she kind of hates that she's attracted to him, and then she finds out that he's been dating a lot of women and he's causing tension between all the women in this community, and she goes on the radio and slanders him and says, look out for this guy. And then she ends up kissing him at a party in front of everybody, and they decide the best thing to do for both of their reputations, because she's trashed his reputation and now her reputation's ruined because she kissed him, is to have a fake relationship. And obviously there's a lot of tension. They really get together quite quickly, but there are other factors pulling them apart and at play around them. And another thing that I loved is that Malachi is like a film student, and he's putting together a documentary about what it's like to date in college, why people date in college, why people get so serious in college. And he is interviewing couples, and we get snippets of those interviews. It's just, that's another reason why the audiobook's so good, because it feels like you're really listening to the interviews. So you get snippets of those interviews throughout the book, and they're kind of fun and sweet and insightful. And you also get snippets of Kiki's radio show. So it's just so well done. I love the writing, and I know that this author wrote a short story collection called Love and Color that was popular, that I really want to read, because I really, once you get used to the writing style, it's really well done. And I thought these were really fleshed out, raw characters, felt like a real college relationship to me. And there are some steamy scenes, especially near the end, like super steamy scenes that I thought were good. And the whole thing was fantastic, and I honestly have no complaints with that book. So that is a new favorite romance, which I always love to find. And then the last ALC I listened to is What Souls Are Made Of by Tasha Suri. And do you ever just have those authors whose writing you just know works for you? That is becoming Tasha Suri for me. I think I will read everything that she writes. I want to go back and read her debut series, and then I love The Jasmine Throne, and Oleander Sword comes out in August, and I have it pre-ordered. I have a countdown on my phone. I am just a Tasha Suri fan. And if you know anything about her books, you know that she writes fantasy, and this book is very much historical fiction. There is no fantasy elements at all, and this is also YA. And it is part of that remix series I feel like I talk about all the time, where popular authors are taking classic novels and remixing them into YA stories that are more diverse, and I will say I think more hopeful. I've read a couple of these now, and I think the endings are just more hopeful than the original books, which I actually appreciate. But I do think that Tasha Suri does a great job of capturing the tone of the original book. Now, I haven't read Wuthering Heights. This is Wuthering Heights retelling, if I didn't say that. I haven't read Wuthering Heights. I have no intentions of reading Wuthering Heights, but I'm a person in the world. I'm familiar with the story. I know all about Heathcliff and Catherine and how everything goes down. And I know all about the Moors. And in this book, we get the Moors. So if you like the setting and kind of the heaviness of the original story, it is in here. It is present. And something else that I know about the original is that Catherine doesn't get a voice, which she's talked about, but she never gets to speak herself. That is not true in this one. She's very much has a perspective, which I liked. This is dual POV. We hear from Heathcliff, we hear from Catherine. They both have different outlooks on their relationship. And it begins with them being apart. Catherine's father has passed away. Her brother has taken over and has pushed Heathcliff away. So it is following Heathcliff and just him trying to survive and all the people that he meets along the way, and then his internal dialogue to Catherine. It's almost like he's writing letters to Catherine at points, and he's got complicated feelings about her as well, and what her love looks like and how she treated him and showed him love and how it wasn't always healthy or made him feel that great. And then we follow Catherine, who is having a complicated relationship with her brother, and she's pining over Heathcliff, but she's also set to get married to somebody who she actually really likes and is attracted to and respects. So there's that part of it and that conflict in itself. So that's really the basis of the story, and I just thought it was so well done. I love the narrators of the audiobooks as well, so I recommended that. And I just thought it was brilliant. So that is it. Those are the 7 books that I've read recently. If I had to pick a favorite, I'd probably pick What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. But I actually liked all 3 ALCs that I listened to. So that one, What Souls Are Made Of, and Honey and Spice. I highly recommend all those. And then from the ones I read physically, I think Sense and Sense Second Degree Murder is just stellar. So obviously I'm into these classic retellings for some reason right now. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. Let me know the best book you've read recently. And once again, thanks so much for your support. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.